Azlan Adnan, M.A. presents The History of Chili Peppers, the food that set the world on fire, Monday the 17th of August, 2026. 500 years ago, chili peppers were unknown outside the Americas. Today they are among the world's most widely cultivated and consumed food plants, embedded in cuisines on every inhabited continent. From Mexico to Sichuan, from India to Ethiopia, from Thailand to Korea, and from the Caribbean to West Africa, societies that had never encountered a chili before the 16th century have made it seem as though the plant had been part of their culinary heritage forever. The history of the chili pepper is therefore one of the great stories of globalization. It is the story of a small American fruit that crossed the Atlantic after 1492 and, within little more than a century, had traveled across Africa and Asia. It is also a story of biology, agriculture, empire, trade, and cultural adaptation. A plant evolved to discourage mammals from eating its fruit became one of the foods humans most deliberately seek out. The chili did not merely spread around the world. It changed the world's cuisines. A fruit born in the Americas, all chili peppers belong to the genus Capsicum, a branch of the nightshade family Solanaceae, which also includes tomatoes, potatoes, aubergines, and tobacco. The genus is entirely American in origin. Its wild ancestors evolved somewhere in the Americas, with the greatest diversity occurring in South America, particularly the Andes and regions of present-day Brazil and Bolivia. The precise evolutionary history is complex. Modern genetic research suggests that the common ancestor of the genus was probably associated with the northern Andes, while different lineages subsequently spread through Central and South America. The chili was therefore not the product of one single geographical event, but of a long evolutionary history involving migration, ecological adaptation, and, eventually, several independent episodes of domestication. There are roughly 35 recognized species of capsicum, but only 5 have been domesticated extensively: Capsicum annuum, C. baccatum, C. chinense, C. frutescens, and C. pubescens. They are not simply different versions of the same domesticated plant. They represent distinct evolutionary histories and, in several cases, independent domestication processes. The most important today is Capsicum annuum. It includes an extraordinary range of fruits, from jalapenos, serranos, and cayenne peppers to ancho chilies and sweet bell peppers. Its wild ancestor, C. annuum var. Glabriusculum, produces tiny, erect, berry-like fruits that bear little resemblance to the large, fleshy peppers cultivated today. Other domesticated species have different histories. C. baccatum is associated particularly with Bolivia and the southern Andes. C. pubescens, the species that includes the Andean rocoto or locoto, is adapted to higher elevations. C. chinense, despite its misleading scientific name, is American rather than Chinese in origin and is strongly associated with the Amazonian region. It includes some of the world's most pungent peppers, including habaneros and Scotch bonnets. C. frutescens includes important cultivars such as Tabasco. The chili, in other words, was never one plant with one birthplace. It was a family of related plants shaped by different American peoples in different environments. The first human encounters. Humans had been eating wild capsicum long before agriculture. Archaeological evidence places human interaction with chilies thousands of years into the past. At Coxcatlan Cave in Mexico's Tehuacan Valley, wild chili remains have been associated with occupation levels dating to roughly 8,000 years ago. Other early remains have been identified in the Ocampo caves of Tamaulipas. More recent interdisciplinary research has complicated the old picture of a single Mexican cradle of chili domestication. Archaeologists, geneticists, paleoecologists, and linguists increasingly see domestication as a prolonged and geographically diffuse process. For C. annuum, central and eastern Mexico remain fundamental to the story, but newer research suggests that southern Mexico and lowland environments may also have played important roles. This distinction matters because domestication is rarely an instantaneous event. A wild plant does not suddenly become a crop. Human communities collect particular plants, save their seeds, transplant desirable specimens, cultivate them near settlements, and gradually favor characteristics that make them more useful. The transformation of wild capsicum followed this pattern. People selected fruits that were larger, more numerous, more productive, differently shaped, differently colored, and easier to cultivate. Over generations, natural variation became human-directed evolution. The result was one of the most remarkable examples of plant diversification in agricultural history. The chili before Columbus. Long before Europeans arrived, chili peppers had become deeply embedded in American societies. In Mesoamerica, chili was not merely a seasoning. It was part of a food system built around maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, cacao, and other crops. It could be eaten fresh, dried, smoked, or ground into pastes and sauces. Archaeological evidence from Oaxaca, for example, has revealed numerous chili remains belonging to several cultivated forms. The ancient Mesoamerican culinary system was already extraordinarily sophisticated. Chili could be combined with tomatoes, herbs, seeds, nuts, and cacao to produce sauces of considerable complexity. The later Mexican concept of mole belongs to a culinary tradition whose roots extend deep into this pre-Columbian world. The Aztecs knew the chili as chili, the word from which the English term ultimately derives. It was traded in markets, cultivated in gardens, and demanded as tribute. Chili was sufficiently important to the Aztec economy that it appears among the goods delivered by subject peoples to the imperial center. It also possessed social and ritual significance. Chili could be associated with fasting, medicine, punishment, and religious practice. Spanish observers recorded the use of chili smoke as a form of punishment and as an irritant against enemies. The fruit's ability to make the eyes water and the lungs burn gave it a practical military potential long before modern chemistry identified the molecules responsible. Chili was also associated with cacao. The bitter beverage consumed by elite Mesoamericans was not the sweet chocolate familiar today. Ground cacao could be combined with chili and other flavorings to create a stimulating, aromatic, and intensely flavored drink. In the Andes, chili occupied an equally important but somewhat different cultural landscape. Quechua-speaking peoples knew it as uchu, and the plant entered Andean mythology and ritual. The name Ayar Uchu, one of the legendary brothers in Inca origin traditions, literally incorporates chili. Archaeological evidence from Peru demonstrates that chili cultivation was already established in the Andes thousands of years ago. Capsicum baccatum appears to have been domesticated in or near Bolivia, and subsequently spread towards the Peruvian coast. C. chinense, probably associated with the Amazonian lowlands, also traveled into the Andes. By the time Europeans arrived, therefore, chili had already undergone thousands of years of human experimentation. It was simultaneously food, medicine, trade commodity, cultural symbol, and agricultural crop. The evolutionary paradox of the chili. The most extraordinary thing about chili is that its defining characteristic is an evolutionary deterrent. Capsaicin and related capsaicinoids produce the sensation humans describe as heat. They do not literally raise the temperature of the mouth. Instead, capsaicin activates TRPV1, a receptor involved in detecting heat and physical irritation. The brain interprets the resulting neural signal as burning. The evolutionary advantage is ingenious. Birds generally tolerate capsaicin far better than mammals because their TRPV1 receptors respond differently. Birds can therefore eat chili fruits, digest the pulp and disperse the seeds considerable distances. Mammals, by contrast, are discouraged by the burning sensation. This makes evolutionary sense. Birds swallow the small seeds whole and disperse them. Mammals tend to chew fruits and seeds, potentially destroying the reproductive material. Capsaicin therefore appears to have evolved partly as a selective defense mechanism, deter seed-destroying mammals while leaving seed-dispersing birds relatively unaffected. The chili also has another line of defense. Capsaicin and associated compounds can inhibit certain fungi and microorganisms that attack the fruit and its seeds. But evolution had not anticipated humans. Humans did something remarkable with a chemical designed to discourage mammalian consumption. We selectively bred plants to produce more of it. The human addiction to heat. Why humans enjoy chili remains one of the great curiosities of food culture. The sensation is technically pain rather than a conventional taste. Yet humans have repeatedly turned that pain into pleasure. The experience can produce sweating, salivation, flushing, and a surge of endorphins and other neurochemical responses. The discomfort becomes part of the reward. This helps explain the extraordinary cultural diversity surrounding chili. People do not merely tolerate heat, they develop preferences for particular levels and types of pungency. One culture may favor a fresh green chili, another a smoky dried pod, another a fermented chili paste, another chili oil, another a powdered spice. Heat can be bright and fruity, smoky and earthy, acidic, floral, bitter, or almost chocolate-like. This versatility is one reason chili proved so adaptable after its global dispersal. Columbus and the Great Columbian Exchange. The Chile's conquest of the world began with one of history's most consequential accidents. Christopher Columbus was searching for a western route to Asia and, ultimately, the valuable spices of the East. When he encountered capsicum in the Caribbean, he associated its pungency with the familiar black pepper, Piper nigrum. The two plants are unrelated, but the European vocabulary of the period encouraged the confusion. The Spanish subsequently transported chili plants and seeds back across the Atlantic. Diego Alvarez Chanca, a physician who accompanied Columbus, described the plant and its use shortly after the first voyages. By the 1490s, capsicum had entered Europe. But Europe was not where the chili's destiny would be decided. The Portuguese were the great accelerators of its subsequent global journey. The Portuguese and the Pepper Revolution. The Portuguese Maritime Empire created an extraordinary network linking Brazil, West Africa, the Indian Ocean, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. Chili could travel easily. Unlike many luxury spices, it was not necessary to transport enormous quantities of a processed product over thousands of kilometers. A handful of seeds could establish a new population. The plant grew readily in tropical and subtropical environments, produced abundant fruit, and could be dried for storage. Portuguese ships carried capsicum from the Americas to Africa and onwards to the Indian Ocean. By the early 16th century, the plant had reached India, where it was rapidly adopted. This was a culinary revolution. India already possessed one of the world's richest spice traditions, including black pepper, long pepper, cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, cumin, coriander, and turmeric. Yet the American chili found an extraordinary niche, because it combined intense pungency with low production costs and adaptability to local climates. The chili did not simply replace existing spices. It joined them. Indian cooks incorporated it into regional cuisines, pickles, chutneys, masalas, curries, and countless other preparations. Different regions selected different cultivars and developed their own traditions of drying, smoking, grinding, and fermenting the fruit. The result is one of history's great examples of culinary indigenization. A plant that had arrived from another hemisphere within living memory became so thoroughly integrated into Indian food culture that its foreign origin became almost invisible. Africa discovers fire. The chili also transformed African cuisines. Portuguese maritime routes carried capsicum to the African coast, where it encountered environments highly favorable to cultivation. From coastal settlements, it moved inland through African trading networks and local agriculture. Again, the speed of adoption was remarkable. African cooks incorporated chili into sauces, stews, relishes, preserved foods, and spice mixtures. In West Africa, it became part of culinary traditions that later spread through the Atlantic world. In Eastern and Southern Africa, different varieties acquired their own identities. The African story is especially significant because it demonstrates that European transport did not mean European control over the plant's cultural meaning. Once introduced, chili entered indigenous agricultural systems and was rapidly transformed by African communities. The Portuguese carried the seed. Africans created their own chili cultures. From India to Southeast Asia, the chili's journey continued eastward. Portuguese trading posts and shipping routes connected India with Sri Lanka, Malacca, the Indonesian archipelago, and the wider Southeast Asian world. Spanish routes through the Philippines provided another pathway across the Pacific. Southeast Asia already possessed sophisticated traditions of pungent food based on ingredients such as black pepper, ginger, and galangal. Yet capsicum added a new dimension of heat. The plant became foundational to the cuisines of Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and neighboring regions. Chili eventually became indispensable to sambal and countless other sauces, pastes, and relishes. In the Malay world, its integration was particularly profound. Chili became part of the culinary vocabulary alongside ingredients that had arrived through much older Indian, Arab, Chinese, and indigenous trading networks. This is an important characteristic of the Columbian Exchange. New foods did not simply replace old ones. They entered existing cultural systems and were combined with ingredients, techniques, and preferences already present. China and the transformation of regional cuisine. Chili reached China during the late Ming period. A Chinese text, completed in 1591, contains one of the earliest written descriptions of the plant. Within a relatively short period, capsicum began appearing in regional cuisines. The transformation was particularly dramatic in areas such as Sichuan and Hunan. Sichuan cuisine is now internationally associated with chili, yet chili was not part of ancient Sichuan cooking. The combination that modern diners regard as quintessentially Sichuan chili together with Sichuan pepper and other aromatics is the product of a post-Columbian culinary evolution. The distinction between chili heat and Sichuan pepper's numbing sensation produced an entirely new sensory experience. The chili did not merely add another spice. It changed the architecture of flavor. The same process occurred elsewhere in China. Different provinces selected different varieties and incorporated them into oils, pastes, pickles, stir-fries, soups, and preserved foods. By the 19th and 20th centuries, chili had become so deeply embedded in several Chinese regional cuisines that its American origin was largely forgotten. Japan and Korea. Japan encountered chili through the maritime networks connecting East Asia with Portuguese traders and other commercial routes. From Japan, chili eventually reached Korea. The exact route and chronology remain subjects of historical debate, but early 17th century Korean sources clearly document the plant. This matters because modern Korean cuisine is almost unimaginable without it. Yet, the red chili that now defines many forms of kimchi is relatively recent. Earlier Korean fermented vegetables were not necessarily red or chili hot. Chili gradually became integrated into preservation and seasoning practices, and over subsequent centuries transformed the appearance and flavor of kimchi. The modern association between chili and Korean identity is therefore a striking historical paradox. One of the most recognizable ingredients of Korean cuisine is a plant whose ancestors crossed an ocean only a few generations before becoming culturally indispensable. The same pattern can be seen across Asia. Historical memory compresses centuries of culinary change until an imported plant appears ancient. Europe learns to live with chili. Europe's relationship with chili developed more slowly. The plant initially attracted attention as an ornamental curiosity. European gardeners valued its brightly colored fruits, while physicians and herbalists investigated its medicinal properties. The problem was cultural competition. Europe already had established traditions of pungent seasoning, particularly black pepper and other imported spices. Chili therefore had to find a niche. It did so most successfully in southern and central Europe. Hungary eventually developed one of the world's great chili traditions. Mild capsicum annuum varieties were dried and ground into paprika, creating a spice that could provide color and flavor without the extreme heat associated with many American cultivars. Paprika became central to Hungarian cuisine and later spread throughout Central and Eastern Europe. Spain developed its own traditions around dried and smoked peppers, most famously pimentón. In the Iberian Peninsula, chili and sweet pepper became incorporated into sausages, stews, sauces, and preserved foods. Europe therefore did not simply adopt the chili in its original form. It domesticated the flavor culturally as well as botanically, producing varieties ranging from sweet and aromatic to intensely hot. Chili and the economics of cheap heat. One reason for the chili's spectacular success was economic. Black pepper was a valuable commodity for centuries. It had to be transported long distances from its production zones and could command high prices. Chili, by contrast, could be grown in many climates and reproduced easily from seed. It effectively democratized pungency. A smallholder could grow chili beside food crops, dry the fruits and store them for later use. A household did not need access to an expensive international spice network to enjoy intense heat. This characteristic helped chili penetrate rural economies as readily as elite cuisines. It was therefore not simply a spice of empires. It became a spice of peasants, farmers, and ordinary households. The chili and food preservation. Chili's success was also linked to preservation. Drying transformed a highly perishable fruit into a concentrated seasoning capable of being stored for months. Grinding it into powder made it easy to distribute and combine with other ingredients. Chili also became associated with fermentation, pickling, and preservation. Its antimicrobial properties have attracted considerable scientific interest, although historical claims that chili itself preserved food should not be confused with the much more important effects of salt, acidity, drying, and fermentation. What chili did exceptionally well was make preserved food more attractive. It could mask undesirable flavors, contribute aroma and color, stimulate appetite, and provide a distinctive sensory signature. The result was not simply longer-lasting food, but more culturally distinctive food. From medicine to chemistry, long before modern pharmacology, American peoples used chili medicinally. European physicians soon noticed similar properties after the Columbian encounter. Over time, scientific investigation identified capsaicin as the principal source of pungency. In the 19th century, chemists isolated and studied the compound, while the 20th century transformed chili from a culinary curiosity into a subject of pharmacological research. Capsaicin eventually became important in topical analgesic preparations because repeated exposure can desensitize certain pain pathways. It has also become a major research tool for studying nociception, the biological mechanisms through which organisms perceive pain. The same molecule that makes a chili feel dangerously hot has therefore helped scientists understand the nervous system. Measuring fire, the Scoville scale. For centuries, people could only describe chili heat subjectively: mild, hot, fiery, savage. That changed in 1912 when American pharmacist Wilbur Scoville developed the Scoville organoleptic test. Scoville diluted a chili extract in sweetened water until a panel of tasters could no longer detect its heat. The number of dilutions became the pepper's Scoville heat unit rating. The original method was subjective, but the concept became enormously influential. Modern laboratories use analytical methods, particularly high-performance liquid chromatography, to measure capsaicinoid concentrations more precisely. A sweet bell pepper registers essentially 0 Scoville heat units. A typical jalapeno occupies the low thousands. Many cayenne varieties reach tens of thousands, while some habaneros and related peppers reach hundreds of thousands. Then selective breeding pushed the biological limits of human tolerance. The Carolina Reaper, developed by Ed Curry, became famous for averaging around 1.64 million Scoville heat units. In 2023, Guinness World Records recognized Pepper X, another curry cultivar, with an average rating of 2,693,000 Scoville heat units. The progression is almost absurd when viewed against the evolutionary purpose of capsaicin. Humans have spent centuries converting a defensive chemical into a competitive sport. The industrial chili. The modern chili is also a major agricultural commodity. The genus now grows across tropical, subtropical, and temperate regions. Peppers are cultivated for fresh consumption, drying, sauces, oleoresins, colorants, pharmaceuticals, and processed foods. Industrial food production has transformed chili into a standard ingredient of global manufacturing. It appears in sauces, instant noodles, snacks, processed meats, pickles, spice blends, and countless convenience foods. At the same time, the globalization of cuisine has created a new market for regional varieties. Consumers increasingly distinguish among jalapeno, chipotle, ancho, guajillo, habanero, Scotch bonnet, bird's eye chili, Kashmiri chili, Aleppo pepper, and hundreds of local landraces. The chili has thus become both a mass commodity and an object of gastronomic connoisseurship. A global plant with American DNA. The most extraordinary aspect of chili history is the speed with which cultural ownership disappeared. A diner in Bangkok can eat a chili that evolved in the Americas. A Sichuan cook can use a plant that did not exist in China before the Ming dynasty. A Korean family can make red kimchi with a pepper introduced only a few centuries ago. An Indian cook can prepare a curry whose defining heat comes from a crop unknown to the subcontinent before Portuguese maritime expansion. The chili demonstrates that what we call traditional cuisine is often much younger and more cosmopolitan than we imagine. Cuisines are not static inheritances. They are historical ecosystems. Ingredients arrive, compete, hybridize, become localized, and eventually acquire the authority of tradition. The chili is perhaps the supreme example. The food that set the world on fire. The history of the chili pepper is ultimately a history of human adaptation. The plant began as a wild American berry. Indigenous peoples cultivated it, selected it, and incorporated it into agriculture, medicine, ritual, and cuisine. European voyages then carried it across oceans. Portuguese and Spanish merchants dispersed it through the networks of the early modern world. African, Asian, European, and Middle Eastern societies subsequently transformed it into something new. No European empire could dictate what the chili would become. The seed traveled in ships, but its destiny was decided in kitchens. Indian cooks turned it into curry heat. Indonesians made sambal. Sichuan cooks paired it with numbing pepper. Hungarians transformed it into paprika. Koreans incorporated it into the evolving culture of red kimchi. Africans created their own sauces and seasonings. Mexicans retained and elaborated one of the world's oldest chili traditions. The result is a peculiar triumph of biological evolution and cultural evolution occurring together. Capsaicin evolved to discourage mammals from eating a fruit. Humans responded by cultivating hotter varieties, breeding them deliberately, preserving them, trading them across oceans, grinding them into powder, fermenting them into pastes, and traveling thousands of kilometers simply to experience the burning sensation again. The chili pepper's conquest of the world required neither armies nor political decrees. It required only a handful of seeds, a network of ships and traders, adaptable farmers, inventive cooks, and an apparently inexhaustible human appetite for pain disguised as pleasure. 5 centuries ago, most of humanity had never seen a chili. Today, the world burns with it.
The author has placed this work in the public domain. It may be freely imported, exported, shared, distributed, edited, modified, or reformatted without explicit consent from the author. As a visually impaired person, the author asserts his rights under the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled. 2013, wipo.int.
Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to show your support.